Hello, the Mennyms Chapter 9. The conference. Subi and Vinetta arrived last at Grandpa's room. Took you long enough, the old man grumbled. You sit there, Vinetta, he pointed to the only chair left empty in the room, and you, Subi, can just sit yourself on the floor. Here's a cushion. So saying, Magnus flung the cushion at Subi with such vigour that it knocked him over, and Poopy and Wimpy, sitting side by side on the ottoman, laughed nervously. Serves you right, said Grandpa. You shouldn't have kept us waiting. Joshua was sitting on a stiff back chair near the door. He had made up his mind to say nothing. His anxious wife and domineering father were just too much for him. The loss of his comfortable, lonely job still hung over him like a cloud. Appleby was leaning against the end of Grandpa's bed, sensibly away from the dangling foot, though, as the favourite grandchild. It is doubtful whether she'd have ever been treated to the force of it. Tulip, Lady Mennym, was sitting in the big armchair, studying her own neatly written knitting pattern before resuming work on the cardigan in her lap. It was not for any member of the family. It was part of her own little business venture. Posted off to Harrods as others had been before, it would be sold as an exclusive creation and make more money to pay the never-ending bills. Minor royalty and fashion models had worn the Tulip Mennym label and recommended it to those friends of theirs who could afford it. Grandpa looked at her and gritted his moustache. She obviously was not paying attention, but at least she had come. Now, said Grandpa ominously. First things first. What do you think about Albert Pond's letter? Nobody spoke. Joshua? Queried the old man, looking determinedly in his son's direction. Not much, said Joshua with economy. What sort of answer's that? Said Sir Magnus with growing irritation. Silence. Poopy stared hard at Grandpa. His blue button eyes were very round and innocent. His straight yellow fringe touched the top of his eyebrows. His small mouth struggled as he made the effort to put a thought into words. Why does he think being a sir is so important, Grandpa? He asked at last in a puzzled little voice. Why are you a sir? In all of 40 years he had not given this a thought. Sir Magnus, for once, looked uncomfortable. Truth to tell, he hadn't the faintest idea why he was a sir. Being born, aged 70, there were many things he did not know about himself when young. The memory built into him had not included any information about his knighthood. Memory is so capriciously selective. What made it even more difficult was that Kate, or whoever was responsible, had not made him a natural liar, so to make up a story about it and tell it with conviction was more than he could manage at short notice. Appleby came to the rescue. He's called Sir Magnus, she said airily, because the Queen gave him a knighthood for his services to journalism and the reports he sent home from trouble spots in the world when he was a young man. Did you not know he was in Egypt at the time of the Suez crisis? Sir Magnus gave his granddaughter a look of deep admiration. It had the makings of a classic pretend, but he felt it was risky to let her to go any further. Young man's stuff, he said depreciatingly. No good living in the past. But what's a knighthood? persisted Poopy, still looking eagerly from beneath his yellow fringe like a little dog hot on the scent of a bone. The question is irrelevant, snapped Grandpa. Had the unfortunate Poopy been within range of the purple foot, he would undoubtedly have been thumped against the wall. What is relevant, he continued quickly, is this young man's proposal to pay us a visit. How do we stop him? Ignore the letter, said Subi. If we don't answer it, he'll assume that we haven't received it, or that if we have, we don't want to know. We don't know what he would assume, insisted Sir Magnus, and even if he made either of the assumptions you suppose, that would not stop him from dropping in unexpectedly one of these days. He doesn't sound like the sort of young man who would come without warning, said Vinetta anxiously. He sounds too sensitive and considerate. Sir Magnus would not be deflected. We must assume, Vinetta, that unless we dissuade him, there is every possibility that he will come. So how do we dissuade him? Appleby, without any by your leave, snatched the letter from under Grandpa's hand. She had read it before. They all had. Now she read it again, more slowly and more carefully. We need, she mused, an unanswerable excuse for being absent from home for the whole of November. We've never been absent from home in our lives. We're certainly not going to start now, growled Subi. We don't really need to go, explained Appleby slyly. The absence will only be a pretend. Say we've booked a holiday in Cornwall. And of course we will omit to tell him precisely where. A holiday in Cornwall in November, scoffed Subi. Your pretends are not up to their usual high standards, Apples. I could do better than that, and I don't even like pretends. All right, young fellow, snarled Grandpa. If you're so clever, do better. Appleby gave Subi a look of jealous fury. Just let him dare do better, the look said. Then, just as the atmosphere was becoming unbearably tense, and the purple foot was itching to kick someone or something, Appleby was visited by inspiration. I know, she said. It's easy. We are going to fly to Canada on a month's visit to our cousins, Sati and Lodi. They have just had a new baby, and we are all going over for the christening. And who, may I ask, are Sati and Lodi? Demanded Subi in a heavily sarcastic voice. Don't you ever listen to anything I say? I've just told you they're our cousins. We haven't seen them for 3 years. Sati married Lodi in London 3 years ago. It was a real society wedding. We were all there. The twins were much smaller then, and Lodi had them as flower girl and page boy. They wanted me to be a bridesmaid, but I couldn't because even at 12 I was taller than Lodi, and I thought it would look silly. Googles wasn't even born then. Hold on, cried Grandpa. I don't think we need a whole family history. Still, the story does sound quite probable. You can write the letter, Appleby. I'll check it for errors and sign it. You can look on it as a piece of English homework. Geography too, for that matter. Whereabouts do they live in Canada? The purple foot had relaxed and was swinging carelessly and nearly touching the floor. Grandpa, for once, was sitting bolt upright, unsupported by his pillows and cushions. His attitude expressed enthusiasm. Without the least hesitation, Appleby said, Manitoba. It was such a beautiful sounding name. Right, said Grandpa with a twinkle in his black button eyes. See what you can find out about Manitoba before next Friday. Friday was Appleby's day for lessons with Grandpa. She didn't know whether to be vexed or pleased. "And you, Suby," Grandpa began, but he got no further than that. Suby jumped off his velvet cushion and resisted the temptation to hurl it at somebody. "I'm going," said the blue Mennym forcefully, his silver eyes glinting. "I've had enough of this. You can make fools of yourself if you like, but you're not going to make a fool of me." Joshua, without moving from his chair, leant over and opened the door to let Suby escape. As he strutted out, his father gave him a look of deep accord. Joshua's amber lozenge eyes hid more than they revealed. He usually kept his grizzled head down and his chin tucked into his neck, a bit like a monk bent over his breviary. All he ever wanted was to be left in peace. Was that too much to ask? Tulip put down her knitting and looked round the room after Suby had left. "I'm sure I do not know what this family is coming to," she scolded. "We can never have a conference without somebody walking out in a huff." "Somebody is nearly always Suby," said Appleby spitefully. "And I wish he'd stop calling me Apples. He knows I hate it." Joshua made up his mind to speak, though it went against the grain. "Let's call it a day," he said firmly. "Appleby can write the letter. I think it should come from me rather than Father. The young man obviously hasn't worked out our ages, and we don't want complications in years to come." In their terms, Father could easily be 110.